Sounds great.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm very excited to be here once again with Shannon Reed, who's going to be talking about her book, Why We Read, on bookworms, libraries, and just one more page before lights out. And we had the most awesome conversation sometime last year. I don't know the exact date, but it was such a good conversation that I just had to have her back.
I want to say
It might
April-ish.
have been April. That's 1 out of 12. I'm sure it's it's a good shot. It was April. But anyways, we're going to talk about Shannon's book more tonight, and I will send you a link to the recording that we had from last time so you can, compare and contrast. But before we get to our conversation, I just wanted to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library who support all of our programming. We just couldn't do it without them. And I'd like to thank Shannon for once again letting us share this program with other libraries because, of course, when libraries work together, we make magic. And this is our times two magic because we're having Shannon our second time. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom screen. I'll be paying attention to that to moderate questions to Shannon. But if you want to chat with each other, feel free to do that in the chat. Shannon, you did say hello, 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 but you just said it to me. So you might want to click on everyone.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hello to everyone. I'll send it in the chat in just a minute. It's really great to be here. Thank you for asking me back.
Oh, I had such a great time last time. I can't even tell you. So let's just get started. And like I said, this is just a conversation. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A and I'll moderate them. But I have plenty to get us started. So Shannon, first, tell us who you are and what you wrote.
I'm Shannon Reed. I am a writer and professor and the director of undergraduate studies for the creative writing program at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm in the middle of transitioning out of the end of the semester and arriving into my summertime life, which is where I prioritize my writing. As you mentioned, I'm the author of Why We Read on Bookworms, Libraries, and Just One More Page Before Lights Out, which is a memoir with a lot of humor in it about my life as a reader. I started reading when I was 2 years old. My grandmother taught me. I think she just wanted me out of her hair, and it worked really well because I have never stopped reading. I really always have a book with me and really, really love books and reading. But I wrote a second book. This is actually my first book, Why Did I Get a B? And other mysteries we're discussing in the faculty lounge. And this is also a memoir with humor. I don't know how I became a memoirist. I really don't think I've had that fascinating a life. But anyway, this one is about my teaching career. I have taught pre-K all the way through college, as I mentioned, and that book looks at that. And I'm working on my third book.
I don't think you were working on a third book last time we talked.
No, I signed the contract in December, so it's new. It's new since we talked. It's going to be called My Girls, on the iconic girl characters of literature and how they shaped me. And yeah, I'm so excited about it. I'm going to write probably 12 to 15 essays where I look at different iconic girl characters, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Anne of Green Gables. I'm going to look at Lizzie Bennet and Jane Austen, who is also kind of a girl character to me, and some more modern folks as well. And I'm actually going to England next week to do some research on Jane Austen. One of the things I want to do with the book is my late father spent time taking me and other members of my family, but especially me, to different places like Laura Ingalls Wilder's home in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, and Bath in England, where Jane Austen spent some time. So I'm going back to those places to kind of remember what it was like to be there with him and to see those places and what they mean to me now, 20 or 30 years later.
Wow. So I have two things to say about that. One is I was a huge, huge Nancy Drew reader. I know it hasn't aged that well, but huge. It's so much so that I actually wrote a Nancy Drew book when I was like, I don't know, 12. And it was terrible. It was, as you would expect, terrible. So I threw it away. And I'm so sad I did that. But also, if you're in the area, Shannon, you should come to our Jane Austen tea. We're going to have one in September or
Oh,
October. I haven't decided yet. Because, this is the 200th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth.
Yes, it is. In fact, I have to. One of the reasons I'm going to England next week is because there's so much Jane Austen stuff happening that you can't book anything in June, July, August, September. So I need to get there and see everything before all the Austenites descend. And yes, I would love to come to the tea. And I'm definitely writing about Nancy Drew. And I saw in the chat, I'm definitely writing about Joe March as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, those are there. My editor was a little concerned that I not just write about characters that everybody is already familiar with, which I understand, but I was like, no, those are the people we want to think about. We want to keep reading about Joe March. Like
Mhm.
she's iconic. That's the point.
That sounds amazing. Also, because in relation to why we read, part of that really is the characters can affect us so deeply, affect our behavior, our emotions, all of that. So I just think it's a perfect, like, sort of like segue why we read into, what we read.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so. I think that one of the things I've been so interested in why we read, and hopefully in this next book as well, is sort of tracking what reading does to us, and what these girl characters do to us, like how they actually shape us and change the way we think about ourselves and see the world. As part of, a full balanced life, no one character should like completely influence you. But I think it's interesting to think about like reading as a force for inner change as well as an entertainment or an education.
Mhm. Um, I do would prefer for people to put your questions in the Q&A, but this one just popped up that I just have to ask you because it's very different from what you just said. Would you consider writing about Cinderella, her stepmother, or the evil queen in Snow White? Because you're talking about, I mean, these are like, they're all fictional characters.
Mhm.
Talk about fairy tales as well as like, the.
Yeah, I actually love that idea. I think that's fascinating. I keep thinking about like, or hearing somebody mention someone that I'm like, oh, I need to write about that person, whether they're a real person or a fictional character. And what I kind of have to spend some time thinking about is who can I really make a case for having shaped and changed me? Don't think that Cinderella or her stepmother probably did, but the fairy godmother maybe did. I've always really enjoyed the idea of being a fairy godmother, sort of somebody who like, grants wishes and courtesies and whatnot. So it's a
Mhm.
great idea. I'll think about it.
Okay. So I've recently been obsessed with the Fourth Wing series. I don't know if you've read it. Um, it's in terms of characters and stuff and action and plot, and it's really, really good. And I could see like people get like deeply like including myself in this book, like this series. Um, I just want to talk about it all the time. So like, is that what you found when you wrote Why We Read in like essays that, as you were talking about doing your next book? What kind of stuff what kind of like information did you have about how we get so immersed into reading, into stories, into characters?
Yeah, it's a great question. I almost all of my research is just anecdotal research. I'm not a sociologist. I don't have the capacity to like go and really find out the statistics or conduct a study or anything like that. But I do have all the time I've spent in the classroom and watching my students read. In the book, I talk about the era of the Hunger Games and how I saw the Hunger Games like move through my high school classroom. Go Ask Alice was another book that just like kind of moved through the classroom. And the students, the way they connected to those works and the way they needed to talk about it with each other and the way that they had to keep reading, even if I was like, we're not actually reading right now. We're gonna do some work. Was really profoundly interesting to me. I was just like, the force of narrative is so strong. The desire to understand and see like what's gonna happen. Um, is it's really, really compelling. And as you say about the Fourth Wing series, and I felt that about many books, and I'm sure folks in the audience have as well, just that it's just such a specific phenomenon that I don't think really has a corollary in film or television. Um, Not that we don't get into those and really enjoy watching a whole series. My best friend watches the Lord of the Rings series every few years with his husband, all of the books. Or I'm sorry, all the movies. But I think it's because we are active in reading a book. Our brains are contributing to what's happening in a way that they don't with films or television. That really creates that like I have to be an active participant in finding out what's going to be happening. I am helping to shape this narrative through my brain.
And do you think that's why, although we want so many of our favorite books to be movies or TV shows, we get so mad when they are?
Yeah, I think so. Like we don't even realize that we have an image, but then like whoever, the image. I guess I think it's two things. I think first of all, like we have an image, we maybe don't realize it, or we do realize it, and then the people cast or the way the film is designed or whatever does not quite match what we have in mind. But I also think part of the joy of reading is to not have an image, that you can sort of understand these characters to be different as you are reading them. Like I'm reading my way through the Slow Horses series by Mitch Herron, and they're fabulous. And I don't have a strong understanding of how all the characters look, and it sort of changes from book to book that it's like my brain is kind of shaping or even saying like, oh no, she's not a redhead. She's actually has brunette hair. And I'm watching the television series on Apple Plus, which is so good. Gary Oldman is amazing in it.
Mhm.
But I do find I do feel a little sense of sadness that I now know what those characters look like, instead of having this sort of amorphous understanding of what they look like.
Mhm.
Like it's pinned down, right? In a way that when you're reading, you don't have to pin it down.
Right, exactly. I'm going to do a little crowdsourcing here and ask people in the chat to write which book had the most influence on them. I don't know if we'll get a chance to discuss that, but I would love to see it and share it with Shannon. So anything that you have read and really like felt like it influenced you in some way. Um, can you say again the series you're reading? It's by Mitch Herron, you said.
Yeah, it's the Slow Horses series.
Love horses.
They're a set of novels set in London. He is British and the series is British. They're spy novels, which some people don't love, but I love a good spy novel. And what I really love about these is the Slow Horses are in Slough House, which I'm sure sounds even more like slow horses in a British accent. And they're like they're really bad spies. They've all been sent to Slough House because they either mess something up or they have a problem with addiction. One is a gambler. And so they're just kind of like they're still MI5, but they're the lowest of the low of spies. And so it's really fun to read these characters who are they really are not like type A overachievers. They're I was going to say they're doing their best, but they're not even necessarily really doing their best. And so you read the whole series and you get to know them, and there's changes in their lives, and it's really lovely to read. I'm also a total Anglophile, so I like that part of it as well.
I'm a big fan of the J.D. Robb series. She's actually Nora Roberts, and she writes these futuristic detective romance. It's got sort of something for everybody. I really enjoy those.
Oh,
And I'm really getting a kick out of seeing everybody's what they've been reading and or influenced by. I mean, My Weird School, but Joe was mentioning that by Dan Gutman. To Kill a Mockingbird, Line Witch and the Werewolf, Braiding Sweetgrass. So many amazing books.
yep,
Um,
those are great. There's ones that I agree with completely, and then others I'm not familiar with. I'll have to check them out. It is the best part of this job is that I just get to talk about books with people, and then I learn about books that I haven't heard of before, and then I get to read those books. It's great.
Susan wants to know how long did it take you to write Why We Read?
It took me a little bit over a summer. The joke would be that it took me a whole lifetime to research it because I had to read all those books in order to write about it. I made a very conscious decision in writing Why We Read to not read any books, almost no books specifically for that book. So I tried to rely on what I already knew. Um, the Law Ingalls Wilder, the Little House series, of course, I've been reading since I was a kid, but I didn't go back and reread them for that book. And I relied also on books that I've taught. I've taught Gone Girl multiple times. It's always a huge hit with my students. So there is a chapter that's on Gone Girl or an essay on Gone Girl. And I did, I had the book out and I checked a couple things, but I didn't feel like I needed to go back and research it. So that made the writing fairly brisk. And also has nicely opened up the third book when I will be going back and actually rereading a lot of these books and thinking about them differently, I suspect.
Mhm. Which I think is interesting, looking through the list of what people are reading, as well as your own history. I mean, as sort of being a humorist, a lot of the books are not humorous. They're actually very, very serious. So, for me, I almost always have to have some humor in my book just so that it takes me a little bit out of any seriousness. What do you find about that? Do you find that people enjoy what? I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I read a lot of student short stories, and many of my students are really gifted writers. It's really quite a pleasure. Not all of them are, but many of them are. But what I always find sort of surprising. So let me backtrack a little bit and say when I'm teaching intro to writing fiction or intermediate fiction, they basically do two short stories for the class. One, like 6 weeks into the semester, and then the other maybe like 4 weeks later, 10 weeks into the semester. And the first stories that come in are often pretty polished and really highly worked over, and kind of you can tell that this is sort of like their gem, right? That they're like, I worked really hard on this, and they're almost always deadly serious. Just no humor in them at all, which is fine. There's not a requirement that stories be funny in my class. But after about 4 weeks of working with me and learning about my own humor writing, and just sort of having that vibe in the class, I find that the second short story is much more funny. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I decided to see if I could write something funny, and it was hard, but it was really good." Or, I started thinking like, the semester has been really oppressive. Maybe I would like to write something a little bit lighter. So I tried that, and I don't know if it's any good or not, but it was really fun to write. So I think it's interesting that they see writing humor as not just an effect they wish to have on readers, but an effect they wish to have on themselves, right? Uh, which is, I guess, a kind of long-winded way of saying like humor can be really fun to write. Like I make myself laugh when I'm writing it, and that's one of the pleasures of it that probably keeps me going back to it. Um, And I also just really, I love making readers laugh. I always enjoyed, as a child, a teenager, like finding something funny in a book, whether it was a Bill Bryson work of nonfiction or Sarah Vowell's works or something like that. That's something that was like, there's no one delivering it. It's just on a page, but being able like that just words on a page could evoke my laughter and joy was always really enjoyable to me. So I'm always trying to make that happen myself.
I have a question about that because there's such a thing about literary fiction. People uh I don't know. They're like the Siskel and Ebert of books of they've got like this deep meaning, and they're very serious and they never end as you expect them to be. And people read them like a lot, and I'm never really sure if they actually enjoy it or they like to be on the fad.
Right.
So like, what is the purpose of us reading all these different various kinds of books? The serious ones, the sad ones, the funny ones, what is it for us that we get out of reading so widely?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I encounter people who don't especially read widely. I know a lot of people who only read literary fiction. And literary fiction can be funny. George Saunders is a great example. Somebody in the chat asked who my favorite comedic writer is, and I would say George Saunders is my favorite comedic writer. And one of the reasons is he can work truly funny, even juvenile, silly, but also quite sophisticated jokes into literary fiction. Like the fiction is very polished, it's very sophisticated. It's not funny just for funny's sake, which is also okay, but I enjoyed that about him. But I think that reading it ties to our mood, right? Like we have so many different moods. We have so many different ways and that we see the world and things that we need at any time. I don't really subscribe to the idea of reading as self-care. That feels a little reductive to me. But I think that we probably want to read something that speaks to us um, at the place that we are. And we have I think generally a pretty good instinct for choosing the works that do that, even if we're not necessarily able to articulate it in the moment. So like sometimes silly writing is just really fun to read. And then sometimes something that's, a little bit more profound. Um, Though again, funny writing can be profound, but I guess more serious in tone and really thinking about some deep questions about life in a more serious vein is what
Mhm.
we actually want. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think before we started, we were talking about book banning and the effects it can have on society because again, I was talking about that sort of like being able to widely read. What is the purpose of being able to read what's available out there
Mhm.
for us readers? And what is the effect of not being able to access that wide range, especially for new readers or young adults?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think about this a lot. I have heard so many people, I know so many queer folks, even though I don't identify as queer, but I've heard so many queer folks talk about it usually isn't their first experience of sort of realizing that they might be queer. That often comes from something they've seen or television or movies, but the sort of opportunity to think deeply about what a queer life might look like, its challenges and difficulties, but also its beauty and joys, and also its ordinariness, which is often the most difficult part to imagine, that you could just have like an ordinary life with being loved and loving and also be queer. So I hear them saying that were an opportunity to see that. I grew up in a relatively small town, fairly conservative, and I think that books would have been the only way for many of my classmates to have that experience of what queer life could be. But at the same time, one of the reasons why banning books makes me so like, ugh, is not just because people find themselves, but also people find others in those books. I just said, I don't identify as queer, but I read those books too, and I was able to say like, or see like, oh, this is what it means to identify as gay, and you fall in love with someone, and you might get married, and it's kind of a boring, ordinary life, just like, my life is in many ways. That opportunity to just see people and lives and places and times that's not just like what you're already experiencing, and that you may not aspire to and will not experience yourself, but that, life has so much variety. There's so many interesting things out there. And I think that gets cut off when books get banned. Um,
Mhm.
Not just finding ourselves, but also finding how other people want to live their lives.
Mhm. Well, I was also going to say that fiction is in some ways sometimes so much more accessible than nonfiction. It makes things a little bit more easy to read and understand. So I am a romance reader. Most people who know me know that, and I love Jennifer Crusoe, Sonia, by the way. Um, and I have learned so much about the world through these books. And sometimes, yeah, I have to figure out if it's true or not. But that itself is kind of interesting to me. So I truly think that being able to read what you want and when you want to is something that it helps us all expand our minds.
I think
I know people are not here to hear from me, but that's how I feel.
No, I think that's beautiful. That's a great way to put it. I think often about one of the essays in the book I write, I sort of think about the idea of assigned reading that I was assigned to read in high school, especially, but also reading that I am now forced to assign in my role as a professor, and the sort of like dichotomy of like hating assigned reading, and now I assign reading, but I hated it, but now I do it. Um, but I think that one of the reasons why I got through the assigned reading is I just kept reading on my own as well. I never saw reading as like something that I was supposed to do only for school. That was like a different kind of reading that wasn't so interesting for me. And I think it's because of what you're saying, that idea of like, it's fine to read a romance. It's fine to read something silly. I mean, I think I've read books on Monty Python sketches almost nonstop in high school. If you think about it, it's really weird. Like you could just watch them on TV. But I just love seeing the words of them. And like that was just that's so perfectly idiosyncratic. Like that's me. And I
Hmm.
think that everybody can have reading like that. That's just your thing. You like to read about soil. Good for you. Like do that.
I love that. I do kind of read like reading about soil. If I was a gardener, I'd like it more probably.
Exactly. Exactly. And someone else would be like, I do not want to. When I was a kid, my brother had these books that were just like, all you parents out there will know these like books of trucks. They were just pictures of trucks, just endless pictures of trucks. And I would sit next to him. I'm 7 years older than him, and I would sit next to him and I would watch him like read this book, and I just did not understand it. I did not get it. But like we would be out in the world and he would be like combine harvester, dump truck, cement mixer. Like he knew because he was so fascinated by it. And that's like I love that books let you be whatever weird thing you want to be. You want to be a combine harvester expert. A book will help you do that. Amazing.
I do Polly has a question about do you do audiobooks, but I want to expand on that a little bit and say, do you listen to audiobooks? But also this question of what is reading comes up a lot. Like, is audiobook listening reading? Is reading graphic novels? Is that reading? What do you think about that?
I think anytime you consume a book, it is reading. I mean, if you hold, yeah, like that's the correct answer. But if you hold a book up to your head, like that's not reading. But any other kind of anytime you're interacting and taking in the text, that's reading. Audiobooks count as reading. I have had so many students have such wonderful insights about the books that they read for my readings in contemporary fiction class that are different than the students who have like traditionally read a book, but are just as insightful and just as interesting. So I think it totally counts. Having said that, that was a long caveat to say I don't particularly enjoy audiobooks myself. I'm so sorry. I'm hearing impaired, and if the narrator is like clear and easy for me to understand, I love an audiobook, but I've just so often had the experience of starting a book and being like, oh, I'm having trouble understanding what they're saying. I'm having trouble following it. What I ideally want with an audiobook is that I can do something else. I can knit, I can cross stitch, I can clean. And so that juxtaposition of having to like work really hard to understand what they're saying takes away the pleasure of the audiobook for me.
Mm,
So
that totally makes sense. Actually, Shannon, I only listen to books that I've already read because I love to reread and I don't always have time. So
yeah.
for me, I'm in it for the performance, not
Mm.
the words, because I already know the words. And
Makes sense to me. I should try that. I did reread, as I mentioned in the book, I reread the Harry Potter books by listening to them when I was commuting very far away to be an adjunct professor right after I finished my MFA. And that was an amazing experience. And it is what you were saying. Like it, I didn't have the tension because I knew what happened basically, but I still had the joy and surprise of like all the intricacies of the plot and character. And of course, those are famously extremely well read.
mhm. Did you do the Stephen Fry or the oh my God, who did the other one?
Jim Dale?
Jim Dale. Which one
Yeah, I
did you
did the
listen?
Jim Dale.
We did the Jim.
No, his women are a little sexist, I have to say. Like he did a lot of like,
Hermione. Mm.
but I did enjoy hearing them again.
That's right. Somebody wants to know what compels authors to write?
It's
What
a great
compelled
question.
you to write?
Uh, I've always been a writer. I've always just really loved writing. I think, when my students ask me that question, like they ask, where do you get your ideas and how do you get yourself to write? Which I think is very telling that they're like, how do you make yourself write? Um, And I always joke, well, I have a book contract and the manuscript is due by a certain date. So that's pretty motivating. I
Mhm.
like getting paid. That's, but that's, I mean, that's not, that's true, but I know it's a little cynical. So to be more sincere, I have always seen writing as a way to figure out what I think about things. I often don't really know what I think about many things until I write down and find out my thoughts. So that's one reason I write. I often write in celebration of something or someone, or to sort of like put a pin in time. I just wrote an essay for the Post Gazette here in Pittsburgh about the closing of Joanne Fabrics, which, for many people is not that big a deal. But I was really sad about it. It was a place I shopped with my mom and my grandmother. I'm a big crafter, and I was just sad. So
Mm.
for me, that becomes like a point in time. Like that's when Joanne's closed. I don't want to forget about that. I often will write about someone who has passed with the same idea of like trying to capture something about their lives, or even I'll do Facebook posts about at the end of every semester, I say goodbye to each of my classes on Facebook. Just just to remember like who were those kids? Like what were they like? Because the classes keep coming and I've been teaching for 25 years and I lose track of them. And I think I write to entertain. I really like, as I mentioned before, I like making people laugh. I like making people smarter. I like making people feel emotions. It's the theater side of me, but in a form that I'm more adept in, I think, than I ever was as an actor.
Mm. So what's been the best feedback you've gotten for your book? I'm
Hmm.
going to stick with why we read.
Um, I've gotten a lot of really wonderful feedback. I was in New York, not this past weekend, but the weekend before at the quilt show of the quilting guild I belong to, which is the Brooklyn Quilt Guild. And I was walking around with a friend of mine, and someone came over to me and was like, "Are you Shannon Reed, the writer?" And I was like, "Oh, I am Shannon Reed, the writer." That's so exciting. So those little moments where somebody like connects me to the book is really exciting to me. But I would say like specifically about the book, it's things like this, like the chat where everyone's talking about the books that they love and telling me about them and telling each other about them. I love when someone comes up to me and is like, "Oh, I feel the same way about Anne of Green Gables," or "Oh, I had forgotten how much I love Little House on the Prairie until I read it." You got it. You said exactly what I think. That's a really nice thing.
That's awesome. I
Mm.
feel the same way as a librarian when somebody asks me for a book recommendation and I give them a book that I think that they would like and they come back and they're like, that was the best book.
Oh, that's gotta feel amazing. That's just gotta feel amazing. Like you did the matchmaking. You did it.
Exactly. I'm like the Bollywood Indian librarian matchmaker.
I
Maybe.
mean, I would listen to that podcast. I'm just saying, like that would be pretty amazing.
Oh, I don't think so. Anyways, this is a really good question that I also have. As a professional reader, which I feel like I am also, what would you recommend to get over a reader's block? I would love to get back to reading, but it's tough with a reading block right now. And I've been there too, like it's a reading slump or a reading hangover. Like I've read a great book and I can't read something else. What do you do to get past that?
Yeah, it's a really great question because it's a real thing. My students talk about that too. It's just that, they take in so much information and they just kind of like hit a wall and they can't do it anymore. But yet they have to keep doing it. Like it's not an option to be like, I'm gonna tap out of school and come back in 5 weeks. They can't do that. I have a couple of different techniques that I've tried. And this alludes to something that you had mentioned. I will go back and reread a book. Um, Even reading a little bit of Sense and Sensibility or Emma is just kind of a palate cleanser for me.
Mhm.
I also will use that when I'm stuck as a writer because I think Jane Austen's wit is so motivating to me to be funny as well. I see some folks saying in the chat the same thing. It's great to do sort of like a completely different kind of book. That's actually why I started reading the Slow Horses series. I had no intention of reading the whole series. I was like, I'm just going to read this book. It's a spy novel. I almost never read spy novels. It's I was expecting this like really gritty, dark kind of story, which it wasn't and was not in many ways, but it just sort of recalibrated everything for me. And the other thing that I've just started doing, this is not that revolutionary a technique, but I will actually read a part of a book and put it away and come back to the rest of it later. Like instead of staying like, oh, I gotta plow, I just gotta have to keep going. I'm reading a book right now called Winters in the World, and the subtitle is A Journey Through the Anglo-Saxon Year. It's absolutely fascinating. It's nonfiction. It's British. It's about exactly what it says, like how did people experience the seasons in the world during the Anglo-Saxon times in the 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, like before medieval times, which is obviously a time we don't have a ton of information about. And it's great, but it's so information rich. It's beautifully written, but it's so information rich that my brain just starts like spiraling after 2 or 3 pages. And so I have decided, oh, and it's split up into spring, summer, fall, and winter. And I've decided I will just read each section as that season begins. So
Oh,
I'm finishing up spring and then I'll just put it away until fall, like when I'll be interested in it again and ready to take in that dense information. And I think especially for like dense nonfiction, like just take it in chunks. There's no need, unless you're the kind of person who absolutely forgets everything, just take it one chunk at a time. Why not? Those are my tips.
I actually have a program on next Saturday with an author who wrote a book called How to Survive in Anglo-Saxon England.
I know.
I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be a hoot. I'll ask her about winters, though. How do they get through winters?
Yeah, yeah, I would be interested. It's I find ancient peoples really, really interesting. It's I wrote about this in the book as well. It's a new interest for me, and I don't really know where it comes from, but something I'm super, super interested in. Like, what did the Druids do? Who knows?
So Ben asks, do you try to read a certain amount of time every day, like daily exercise, 2 hours or 3 hours? And I would ask the same about writing. Do you try to write every day? Like, what is your writing?
Yeah, those are really great questions. And my students often ask the exact same thing. I think because they want me to tell them how to do it for them.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there's no way to do that. Like you have to figure it out for yourself. I do read pretty much every day. I don't usually set aside a specific amount of time, but I have sort of a time of day that I like to read. I will read between eating dinner and my television time, which can never start before 8 p.m. Very specific about that. Always 8 p.m. is TV time. So sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's like 90 minutes. It just depends on the day. And then I also read when like after I go to bed. I will read in bed. But I used to read for hours and now I read for like 2 to 3 minutes and then I'm done because I'm getting old now. So yeah, I definitely read every day. I miss living in New York where I could read on the subway and the bus. Now I'm in charge of getting myself to work, so I don't have that time anymore. And I should also say that's just pleasure reading. All of my professional reading I do during the day. So I'm reviewing a manuscript for a publishing company right now. I did that during my working hours. I read my student works during working hours. So I'm reading a lot, but I always try to sneak in some pleasure reading in there as well. And in terms of writing, I don't write every day during the school year. I just don't have the bandwidth for it. I mean, I'm writing every day in the sense that I'm writing information to students and I'm emailing constantly with my boss and all that kind of thing. But I don't always have time. I sneak it in when I can. I'll do 10 minutes on the novel I'm writing when I can. And when I have an assignment from my editor that I'll get that done working on an essay or something like that. And then when the summer rolls around, that's when I'm like, okay, everything else, pick gets pushed to maybe an hour out of the day, and writing gets to take 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, including the research in there as well.
Oh, nice. Um, Oh, I forgot to tell you, for our Jane Austen tea, we're serving our food in hollowed out books. So if I don't know if that doesn't entice you to come, I don't know what will.
I mean, I was already pretty in, but now the Hollow books, I'm considering actually moving out of Pittsburgh.
I was gonna say,
Heading
I
to
can
the
see you like
Ashland
turning to the
area.
side and buying train tickets right now. Um, okay, enough about me. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind reading a little bit of your of your book, maybe your the favorite funny essay or your favorite essay or something that really affected you.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I read a little bit from I mean, I'll give you your choice. I could read a little bit from the preface, or I could read from To Get to Go to the Library, which would be a very apt essay. Maybe I'll read from that one. Okay. Okay. This is the after the preface. I'm double checking to make sure I know my own book. Yeah. After the preface, this is the first essay in the book, and it's actually one of the longest. I will not read the whole thing, don't worry. But it's a celebration of all the libraries of my life.
Yay!
To get to go to the library. I am 5 or 6. I've been going to the public library in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania with my parents since before I can remember. I love it there, along with all of my stubborn little heart to be allowed to take out more than 2 or 3 books at a time, since I must share my mother's account and there is a book limit. One day, my mom takes me to the checkout counter where the smiling librarian asks me a series of simple questions and gives me a card to sign. That one gets filed, and another is handed to me, my name neatly printed on it. My first library card. It is a junior library card, I am informed, to be used only in the children's section. No John Irving novels for me. It's the first form of identification I have ever owned, and I am flush with pride at this proof of my existence and independence. I have my own book limit now. I put the card in my otherwise completely empty Snoopy wallet, treasuring the expansive books and life ahead of me. I am 8 or 9. I'm in front of the shelves in the children's section in the same library, trying to decide between 2 books. I always choose carefully, due to that limit, for the books have to sustain me for 7 full days until we return. I favor thick books, which make for longer reading. I am against pictures in books, which do not. A boy, probably 12 years old, appears next to me, too close. I shrink away from him, uneasy. Suddenly, he wordlessly grabs my tote bag. I cling to the straps as I lurch forward, scrambling to keep the bag on my shoulder. I throw the books I had been considering behind me to protect them. Hey, that's my bag! I whisper urgently at him. You shouldn't yell at the library, even when under attack. He gives it another tug, pulling it off my shoulder, the bag now between us, each of us holding on for dear life. Using whatever muscle tone I had developed through my exercise regimen of reading all day, except when choreographing dances to Flash Spiegel in the basement, I yank it back, which knocks him off balance, but he keeps holding on. I'm using my mom's plasticized cotton tote bag from England, decorated with a charming charcoal sketch of a sheep. As I grip, I wonder why this kid so badly wants that bag of all bags. But no matter, that bully is not going to take my books. He yanks so hard, I start to fall forward, but I dig in my heels and yell, "Stop it, you mean boy!" which finally wins the attention of the librarian across the room with her back to us. As she hustles over to intervene, the boy gives up and runs, half slamming into the glass door and starting to cry on his way out of the children's room. I have won, the defender of my castle. To celebrate, I check out both books. I deserve them. I'll stop there. There's more. If you were like, that's not enough library stories, so many more. Don't worry.
I love that you threw the books behind you to protect them.
I feel very like I still feel that way. I feel very defensive of I don't know if that's I wish to defend books.
I think that you started off well. Did you ever figure out why he wanted your book?
And it is one of the great mysteries of my life. I truly have no idea. I think he was just like being mean, like I don't think he even really wanted, he just wanted to grab something, but it was very clear it went entirely wrong for him. I often think that maybe like he was headed for like a wayward youth, and because I fought back, like now he's, like I don't know, a really outstanding citizen in some way because he learned his lesson. Maybe. I love these memories that folks are sharing in the chat about libraries and what they mean to them.
I do too. As a librarian, obviously, makes my heart pitter patter, but also the fact that people have such a great love of books is really wonderful. Uh,
Absolutely.
Um, so when when you wrote this book, did was there something you wanted people to get out of it in particular, or were you just writing because it was a topic that made you happy?
I think that what I wanted to convey was like how beautiful and expansive books and reading are, and how there's so many different ways to experience reading and so many different books out there. And I guess probably the subtext was like, there's a book out there for you, reader. Like, if you're reading this one, you're gonna love other ones. But I also think that one of the things I've learned is, and I know this from talking to other authors about like when I've tried to share what I think about their book, is like once it was published, it's my book, but it's out of my hands what people get out of it. So many people have such like wonderful, rich memories of libraries and books and reading with a parent, which is actually not something I even wrote about in the book. My parents did read to both my brother and me, but I don't write about it in the book. But that was what was evoked for a lot of people, like those wonderful memories. And I really just, I love that. I think people should find what they want in it. I don't think that it's my job to dictate what people get out of it.
Yeah. Um, and going back to what we were talking about audiobooks and what we consider to be reading, I also consider reading aloud to your kids as reading, for both of you.
Absolutely.
I mean, I read aloud to my kids right into middle school. So, that's a good memory for me.
Yeah, I was a nanny and I read to the kids that I nannied for, and I was a preschool teacher and I loved reading to the kids. Though I have an essay in the book that kind of makes fun of being asked to read the same book over and over and over. And that got old. That got real old. But yeah, no, it's just so beautiful to like create a story without the anxiety of creating a story, right? Like you're the interpreter of the story, but you don't have to decide what happens next. I think people who do that are amazing. I have friends who like are telling a long running story to their kids that they're making up night after night. That doesn't appeal to me at all, but I love like sharing a book with a child in that way. And even better, having a child read a book to me that they love is so great.
Mhm. I was a preschool librarian for a while, and I have to say that was probably the best job ever because you could read them the dictionary as long as you do it with some feeling.
Yeah, yeah, they it's the voice, right? Like the comfort of just being read to. Um, though they do get really picky. Like, I would do voices and then they would just get real annoyed with me if I didn't do the voice the same way the next time. And I was always like, I don't remember what accent I do the
Shows
best.
you that they were paying attention, though.
They were paying better attention than I was often.
Uh, People are coming
Yeah,
up with
yeah.
great memories of reading when they were kids.
So great.
Mary wants to know, how do you pick books to read?
Hmm. At this point in my life, I get sent a lot of books, and I have created lists of books from people in events like this telling me what books I need to read. So between those and keeping track of my favorite authors, what they have just published, reading through series, like I was just talking about with this, like I know I will continue to read the Slow Horses series. I think there's three more books I haven't read yet. That does a lot of my picking for me in many ways. I write book reviews and I get asked to blurb books, so I'll read those books as well. Um, but I honestly really love going to my library, the Monroeville Public Library, and just looking at the new books. And picking them up, and I will look at the flap copy, but I also will just like open to a random page and read that page. And if it seems interesting and well written and good to me, like I'll take that book out, give it
Mhm.
a read. Why not?
You said that you
It's kind of haphazard, but I found a lot of good books that way.
I I know a lot of our patrons read sort of serendipitously. If we put it out on display, they're more likely to pick it up.
Yeah.
But you said earlier that you don't normally read mysteries. So if it's up to you, if you had all the time in the world, what do you like to read?
I really love nonfiction a lot, actually. I love really well reported narrative nonfiction that's beautifully written. Some John McPhee is really great. I love a long book about a tragic event. I don't know why. Um, there's a book called Columbine by Dave Cullen. It's like 800 pages. It's fascinating, fascinating. There's a book called 5 Days at Memorial, which was adapted into a miniseries, I think, for HBO by Sherry Fink, which is about the Hurricane Katrina disaster and how it affected a hospital in New Orleans. Loved that book. Thought it was fascinating. Dope Sick. I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote Dope Sick, but it's about the fentanyl crisis in West Virginia
Mhm.
and how it affected the town. Again, adapted into an amazing miniseries. I love that book as well. This sounds so. I wish I had a good explanation for why I love a super depressing book. But I don't find them depressing. I find them, I think they're fascinating. I love, that's work that I could never do. I would never do that research. I could
Mhm.
never find out. I could never piece together a narrative from events like that. So I really admire writers who do it, and I really love reading books like that. So left to my own devices, that's the kind of book I would probably pick up. That or like super colorful, cheerful book about crafts in some way.
Mhm. Yeah, Dope Sick is written by Beth Macy.
Thank you. Thank
We
you. Beth
also found
Macy.
it.
Yeah, Beth Macy actually reads the audiobook of that, which is the first way that I encountered that book for reasons that I no longer remember. And it's so great because she's got a West Virginia accent and like the story should be told in that way. It's perfect.
Polly asks, do you ever not finish a book you aren't enjoying, or do you read to the end no matter what?
No, I put books down all the time. All the
I,
time. I will even stop reading a book that I am enjoying. I have this syndrome that I call the Friday Night Lights syndrome after the television series, which was also a great book, which is that sometimes the work is so good, but I am so tired that I cannot take it in. Like Friday Night Lights, I always felt I could only watch like on a Saturday evening after I had gotten a good night's sleep and like had a nice day. Now I can actually focus on Friday Night Lights. It was that good. And so there are books like that that I just, I just think they're really, really great. And I don't want to blaze through them. I want to take my time and understand them, which might mean putting them aside for a while.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I also will just stop reading a book because it's not for me.
Mhm.
That happens all the time.
I have, I have, or we have about 5 more minutes, and I wanted to ask this question earlier, and I didn't get a chance. But you know how you were talking about assigning reading to your kids, your students? Do you think that that has really hurt the enjoyment of reading for younger kids? I'm not talking about college kids because, of course, they have, hopefully they've already, done. But when I was a school librarian, I was always worried that the kids were reading, especially in the summer, books that were not fun. So they were, and they didn't have people to talk to about it and stuff like that. So I was really worried about that. I don't know if that's something you've seen.
It's a great question. I can only speak to my personal experience, which is I don't think it's the assigning the reading that is so debilitating to burgeoning readers. I think it's the making them answer standardized test question or reducing a work to like, what's the point? What was the main point of the Great Gatsby? I wrote about this in the book a little bit, but I, I, I find out, I when I teach intro to writing fiction, which is usually first or second year students, and it's often students who have not had many English classes at Pitt yet, you know, they'll read like I'll assign a Flannery O'Connor short story that's like rich text. There's so much is going on, so much characters and they'll write a response to it. And usually about half the responses are like, I think that she wanted us to learn that racism is bad. Sort of a sophisticated way of saying that. And I'll be like, no, like, no, there's no, Flannery O'Connor didn't write to make a specific point. She wrote this incredible story. Like, let's get into the story and really look at all the different things that are going on. And you can certainly, in the end, be like, oh, I think that's what I'm taking away from the story. But it was not written to like send a bumper sticker to us in some way. So yeah, I tend to think it's not so much the reading as the what you were just saying, the lack of context, the not being able to talk about things, to not understanding what they're reading and feeling lost in it, that doesn't help. But I
Right.
think that's less damaging than sort of like now answer like, what is the conflict in this story? Um, Not great.
Yeah. Or a tree is to an acorn as a blah blah is a to a. Yeah. I actually think that it would be awesome if kids could just have little book clubs. Like if they're going to get assigned reading, they could just do like a little book club to talk about what they thought of it.
I think some teachers are doing that, and I love it. I think it's great. You know, there's always the problem of you can't get at that level, you cannot get everyone to read the work.
Yeah.
So, you know, some students are always going to be like carrying the water for others. That also happens at the college level, but I tend to have, because I'm teaching upper level creative writing courses, I tend to have students who are like, oh no, I actually did want to read this. I want to learn about it. Um, but yeah, yeah, book clubs are always the ideal, right?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
little cheese, a little discussion, always good.
Actually, I was going to say that I hear what you're saying about the carrying the water thing, but I think a good moderator can really help that along and making sure that every voice is heard and nobody kind of dominates the conversation. And that's where children, I think, can really learn that their voice is important. So I wish that more classrooms did that, where they had like these moderated conversations about books.
Absolutely. I would love to see it. I had colleagues who were able to do that. It was not something that I had the facility to do. And it's fantastic when it can happen. Like anytime people get to talk about something that they don't quite understand but want to understand, that's fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we started this off with me being obsessed with Fourth Wing, and I ran into somebody this weekend who's also obsessed with it. And we decided to do a book club discussion about it in June because neither of us had a place to talk about it, you know? So,
Perfect. That's perfect.
yeah.
I
So,
love
I
that.
mean, your book really talks about, the reader experience, but then the next step for me is how can we integrate that knowledge with our souls, basically? And that's through discussion, I believe.
I love that. Maybe we need to get into that in round three.
I did warn Shannon that I'd have to invite her back because I could just talk to her all day. We
Likewise,
just
it's always a delight.
we just have a couple more minutes, and I was wondering if you wanted to talk about a couple of the books that you had stacked next to you as book
Yes,
recommendations.
yes. I had Winter in the World, which I have already plugged. It's really great. It's really interesting. I am also reading White Teeth by Zadie Smith.
Hmm.
I I do actually love fiction, even though it's not my first choice sometimes. But I'm reading. I've never read any Zadie Smith, so I'm super excited about reading that. And I'm reading Sometimes You Have to Lie, which is a biography of Louise Fitzhugh, who's the person who wrote Harriet the Spy. Because I'm going to be writing about Harriet the Spy, and this is. I should not bring this up right at the end of this conversation, but I will say, like, I don't like Harriet the Spy. Not the book, but the character. I don't like the character.
Mm,
So it's really interesting to read about the person who created her and to start thinking about that for book three.
interesting. Well, when is book three coming out?
I have no idea. It's not due till February of next year, so we're looking at 2027 probably.
That seems so.
Don't like don't start calling the bookstores. They have no idea. It's going to be a while.
You've teased us. And one last comment from Lori who says, it's offbeat. Does anyone know the author of a short story called A Question of Belief? It's a weird book about someone swallowing a toad that took over that person's life.
Ooh, I love that. I have not heard of that, but I love it. I'll
I
check it
have
out.
not either. But
Again, an amazing list of books for me to read. Thank you so much. This is the only reason I do it, to get more.
I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but I am glad that you chose this way to do it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for such a rich conversation. It was really great.
Yeah, this has been an amazing audience. Shannon, thank you so much. And although we have to wait for 2027 for your next book, you might hear from me before then.
I suspect so. I suspect so. I'll see you all at the Jane Austen tea.
Have a good night, everybody. Happy
Bye
reading.
bye.